Welcome to EV Hub Live, a live video podcast for professionals advancing transportation electrification. To find out more about the show, visit atlasevhub.com/live. On today's episode, we'll hear from Anna Waldman-Brown from the Department of Energy's Office of Energy Jobs and Reem Rayef from BlueGreen Alliance about how the Inflation Reduction Act promises to rebuild communities around well-paying, clean economy jobs, the popularity and expansion of the labor movement, and how we can keep these new jobs in the U.S. to ensure workers can build secure lives in a clean economy America. Here's your host, Atlas Public Policy's founder, Nick Nigro.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of EV Hub Live. I'm really excited to be talking about the clean economy. It's a topic that's near and dear to Atlas's heart. We actually just launched today a new product for the public to use to track all the jobs and investments across the clean economy at cleaneconomytracker.org. So check that out when you have a moment. But for now, let's jump right into our conversation. I'm joined by Reem from the BlueGreen Alliance and Anna Waldman-Brown, who just until maybe a couple of days ago was at the US DOE, but I believe you've now just switched over to OMB. Is that right, Anna?
That's correct. Yep, the Made in America office.
Awesome. Very cool. Well, welcome to you both. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
All right. So I'd love to start at a high level. Unions and the labor movement generally is incredibly popular right now, especially when you look at where they were historically. We have a graphic here from Gallup that shows, the polling for favorability for unions is at highest it's been in my lifetime. And, I'm not a young man anymore. And so that's saying a lot. It's over 71% right now. I'd love to start with you, Reem, and then go to you, Anna. What's driving this? Why is there increasing popularity amongst the labor movement?
I think there's probably a number of reasons. Everybody wants a good job and a community-sustaining job that actually allows them to live a good life. And I think that unions are one way to achieve that and to make sure that everyone is achieving that. And I think that there's also a pandemic effect that has illuminated some inequities in our economy and really laid them bare for us. While some folks got to shelter in place and make major accommodations to keep themselves safe and their families safe, others had to continue to go into work. And those folks who kept going into work happened to be the lowest paid folks doing the most essential and important work of preparing food and, stocking shelves and delivering things to us and caring for sick people. And those workers were called essential, but were kind of treated as expendable. And I think that was really, really visible during the pandemic. And I think the popularity of the labor movement as a response to that and a response to that injustice can be attributed to what we all saw laid bare during kind of the height of the pandemic. And I think that's been a huge part of the labor movement's visibility in recent years.
Wow. Yeah, I have to just echo the, called essential but treated as expendable. That's really, powerful. Anna, what's your take?
Yeah, I think Reem hit the nail on the head here. Speaking of things that are at a 50-year high, construction of new manufacturing facilities also in America. I think that there's sort of this recognition that we need to build up our infrastructure and revitalize domestic production. And along with that, people are just really not willing to take these crappy jobs that they've had for the past couple of decades. Also, having recently come from grad school, there's this interesting movement among us sort of intellectual elite and the grad students of unionizing, which I think will sort of have more of these follow-on effects throughout the next decade or so as we're going out into the workforce. So it's an exciting time. The other thing, looking at the big wins from UAW, really historic, 25% wage increases overnight, is this recognition that, hang on, the employers, have been gaining from all of these productivity increases, and the workers who, as Reem said, have been treated as expendable are waking up and realizing, hang on, we used to have something that was a legal mechanism to protect us here. And so there's really this desire to sort of both go back to what we had before in terms of labor power, as well as sort of revitalize and reinvigorate through innovation and through sort of novel mechanisms. You start seeing tech workers talking about unionization, et cetera.
Yeah, you brought up UAW, Anna, and I believe, Reem, you've got some news on UAW down in Alabama just from this morning. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. A majority of workers at a Mercedes manufacturing facility in Vance, Alabama, just signed union cards in support of joining the UAW. I think they reached the 50% threshold, which means that they're going to have a rally to kind of continue to bring about support for joining the union, and then they'll have an election when they hit 70%. And this is all a part of UAW's kind of broader effort to organize the entire auto industry in the U.S. beyond kind of the big three of Ford, Stellantis, and GM. We also saw recent wins in the Volkswagen facility in Chattanooga, Tennessee, where a majority has signed union cards in support of joining the UAW, as well as another facility in Montgomery, Alabama, a Hyundai facility. And so we're seeing these huge wins in the South, where everyone is recognizing the benefits of joining a union, even beyond the higher wages, but all of the other things that come with protection by a strong contract, including self-determination and dignity, and all of the many benefits that come with a contract.
One of the things, to what Anna was saying earlier about historic investments in manufacturing, clearly there's going to be entire new communities that are going to be built as a part of this clean economy transition. And one thing I hope we're all trying to learn, as policy people in particular, is to not recreate mistakes of the past, where we build up these communities and then sort of leave them to crumble, essentially, as either companies fail or technologies transition, and effectively leaving these communities behind. What do we need to do as a policy community to help ensure that as we're building sustainable communities, that we're doing so in a way that's sustainable around well-paying clean economy jobs, but also building the supporting infrastructure around that so that these communities can thrive, whether or not some of these companies survive in the long term? Reem, why don't we start with you on that?
Yeah, well, I should give a lot of credit to Anna and her colleagues at DOE, but something that we've seen the Department of Energy doing increasingly is that no grant goes to a manufacturing company without some strings attached, right? You don't just get federal dollars for free, but there are some commitments that you have to make. And increasingly, DOE has really gotten smart about what it's requiring of the companies that are getting these federal funds. And so we can make sure that when we provide a company with funding to build or expand a battery manufacturing facility, we want to know, or DOE wants to know, what commitments are you going to make to your community to ensure that you are hiring from within that community and really lifting up a young generation and setting up careers for those folks? How are you going to make sure that you are not a kind of polluting neighbor in the environment? How are you going to be a good neighbor and ensure that folks in this community still have good air to breathe and clean water to drink? And then there's also all of the commitments that one can make to workers of, are you going to try to disrupt a bargaining process and an organizing process, or are you going to be a real participant in an organizing process? Are you going to provide your workers with a fair wage, or are you not? And so DOE is asking all of the right questions of companies and making sure that everybody who needs to be at the table is at the table to ensure that these facilities and manufacturing facilities in the clean economy aren't just kind of extracting cheap labor from communities, but actually lifting them up by making real lasting investments.
All right, Anna, let's go over to you and tell us more about this. Get into some of these details here, because it sounds great, but it feels like it's very hard to make sure that it's going to happen.
It's tricky, yeah. Especially because a lot of the incentives around, if you want to be globally competitive, right, you have an advantage if you don't need a lot of permits for polluting the environment, if you're going to pay the workers low-paying wages. So that's why a lot of the Biden administration's policy has really been around innovation, as well as creating sort of sustained, lasting change across the manufacturing and infrastructure development. So for the Department of Energy, this is 20%, what Reem was talking about, the community benefit plans. Brand new sort of idea for the DOE. The NSF has been talking about this for a while in terms of sort of broader impacts, societal impacts. But for the bunch of nerds at the DOE who are used to thinking about things in terms of innovation, and not even, or in terms of like energy and production, not even in terms of innovation per se. And so you're starting to see all these new grants that are both incentivizing, a realization that, as one factory owner I interviewed in Ohio said, if you can't compete with $1 a day jobs, then we have to compete with our heads. So there's the 48C tax credits, which are talking about brand new sort of grid transmission infrastructure, as well as looking at the hydrogen economy, looking at sort of new, there's the moonshots and the earth shots projects around, can we actually become a global leader in technologies that don't really exist and haven't been fully developed yet? Things like hydrogen, carbon capture, both of which are somewhat controversial, but there's potential for great sort of leapfrogging innovation there. And throughout all of this innovation and incentives to sort of develop and commercialize new technology, giving credit to the DOE, they're really thinking about this as, I feel like a pipeline's the wrong metaphor, then transmission lines from production through, or from innovation and R&D through to creating workforce development. They're talking about battery engineers. You need to think about sort of this sustained new push towards interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary engineering, from mechanical, electrical, chemical, advanced manufacturing. And then on the shop floor, thinking about when you start bringing in robots or advanced automation, there's really a choice around how you're designing those jobs. And so with the group, the Battery Workforce Initiative, which is what I've been part of at the Office of Energy Jobs, the incentive there is to sort of facilitate career trajectories, starting with the operator level. So the people just pushing the buttons, because you as a firm, especially if you're setting up some brand new factory, and you don't tend to assume that you're going to have a available, highly skilled, affordable workforce. But what you can do, and what both the grants and these other initiatives that are working with Department of Labor, Department of Education, White House folks, is to think about how would you set up these career trajectories. So the firm is designing, say, someone comes in as the button pusher, and then they learn a little bit more about how to maintain that machine. And eventually, if a firm, say, a new battery plant puts in their community benefits plan, well, we're going to cover tuition reimbursement. We're going to have registered apprenticeships, which, by the way, apprenticeships will boost your tax credit from, I think it's 8% to 30% for the 48C tax credits. And so that's, a huge benefit to the firm if they agree to do something that maybe they hadn't really thought about doing before.
In these community benefit plans that you mentioned, is there anything in there that's not just tied directly to the facility that benefits the community, sort of ancillary jobs, other things that are necessary for a sustainable, thriving community that the DOE or federal government more broadly has some power to influence?
Yeah, in terms of sort of avoiding the next Rust Belt.
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah, so some of the idea behind this, the apprenticeships and the career trajectories, is there's a core, 70-ish% of the skills you learn in semiconductors or biomanufacturing are going to be the same as your battery manufacturing, right? These are large factories that have sort of flow processes and fancy, fully automated equipment where you have a human computer interface and you're just touching a bunch of buttons on a touch screen. And so one of the ideas is to create this whole sort of an entire core of advanced manufacturing workers who really know, they might come in without having many skills, but working with community colleges and with unions and other workforce institutions to set up these career trajectories starting at the that will be sort of cross-transferable skills. So if, say, your battery plant doesn't quite succeed because there's a lot of federal money out here, we might be distorting the market. There are these startups that will hopefully thrive. But if not, then if you learn, if you get sort of registered apprenticeship training or you're certified advanced manufacturing in some capacity, then you might be able to go to the semiconductor firm or whatever the future is that is going to be sort of that next advanced manufacturing firm coming in.
Reem, back to you on this topic before we go on to something else. I want to understand a little bit more about what the BlueGreen Alliance, where you sit, like what are they hoping from things like community benefits plans? Are there things that there are facets of them that need to be added? Is it enough what they're doing? Do we feel like this is sufficiently low risk that these investments are going to be sustained and build these communities that we're trying to ensure get built?
Yeah, and to be honest, I think that nobody has the answer about like what is the perfect community benefit plan, and how do we ensure that we're doing like really good community engagement? I think these are all really, really hard questions that we're all learning the answers to as we kind of go along. And there's frankly not enough community benefits plans out in the world right now that have been like enacted for us to say like this is what a good one is and this is what a bad one is. So this is the $1 million question. But I think that what we hope to see in new manufacturing facilities is facilities that are in harmony with their community and that they are serving the community's needs. They are hiring from within that community. They're investing in education of the workforce that they are going to need and rely on in the future, 5 and 10 years into the future, to the point that Anna was making about partnerships with community colleges and so on. And so I think that it's kind of, we're concerned about box ticking, right? There's no kind of box ticking exercise that one can do to ensure positive outcomes for a company and for the community that they're in. But my understanding is that DOE is hoping to see a real, meaningful and ongoing engagement with a range of community-based organizations such that we can trust that this community has decided, yeah, it is, we are willing kind of participants in building and fostering this facility, which will rely on our participation for success.
Yeah, we had a sort of wetland protection that one firm was pledging to do. There's, I know Facebook at one of their facilities in San Jose has a bird sanctuary on their rooftop. That was their compromise with the city. We're seeing, there's another one that had a bike path that they were proposing, and a lot of common sort of STEM education, sponsoring robotics clubs, introducing young people to manufacturing in a variety of ways.
I wonder if we could take a step back and just reflect a little bit on the Inflation Reduction Act itself. It's sort of become the undercurrent of driving so much change right now. And it's hard to really fathom how much influence it has, particularly in the area of jobs and investments in manufacturing and such. Let's stick with you, Anna, and tell us a little bit about what are we going to see as a result of IRA when it comes to North America and this supply chain. When we look back at COVID, one of the outcomes of it was we are very vulnerable as an economy when it comes to our supply chain, and IRA in part, I think, was trying to address that experience.
Yeah. It's just incredible what the sort of all of the agencies are talking. There are interagency working groups happening on a regular basis between sort of all of these different connections being made across government, which I think is sort of hard to see from the outside. But from the inside, we have a weekly tracker being sent around. These are the hundreds of thousands of new jobs. This is the estimated 25% reduction in global costs for, I think it's hydrogen, carbon capture, and a couple other renewable technologies, specifically based on the innovation and commercialization efforts sponsored by the IRA, as well as I think sort of the understanding that supply chains matter and that there's something that could break really came to the fore during the pandemic. And the sort of the solution to that, the challenge is it's sort of a long-term process, and government often acts on the couple years to sort of 4-year maximum is the project cycle. But what's happening now is sort of this really incredible, I mentioned sort of historic levels of private investment in manufacturing, as well as a real shift when you talk to, say, automotive manufacturers, a shift towards electric vehicles that they hadn't really, they're sort of, they know this is going to come about eventually, like heat pumps, right? These manufacturers totally have the capacity to build these clean technologies, and they've just been sort of waiting by the sidelines until there's clear enough market signal that there's going to be demand for this. And the government also has an interesting role to play on the procurement side, right? Here's we're talking about $1 trillion, so up to $2.5, maybe even $3 trillion overall between government procurement, the bipartisan infrastructure law, Inflation Reduction Act, and then CHIPS and Science. And throughout all of these are these discussions around community benefits, quality jobs, building up a sustainable domestic manufacturing base. And it remains to be seen. I think it'll take at least 5, probably 10 years before we start seeing what the results are. But at the moment, you talk to the unions, you talk to the governors, even both red states and blue states. These states are really excited, and the manufacturers. We spoke with a big automotive OEM that said, we've just been waiting for the EV signal to come, and there's no going back at this point. There might be a slowdown, sort of depending on demand and depending on how long it takes to build up the infrastructure, get the renewables connected to the grid, get the workforce developed. There are all these sort of hurdles along the way, but generally it feels like, at least for the first time in my lifetime, America really cares about transitioning to a carbon-free economy.
Reem, let's go to you on this one. When you look at what I hate to say legacy, because I agree with Anna that it's way too early to talk about legacy of something that's only in its beginning stages. But what do we think about the impact, or what do you think about the impact of IRA is going to be on the supply chain? Is it really the key driver of everything right now that you're seeing, or was some of this stuff going to happen anyway? Is it accelerating all of it? Tell us a little bit about how much impact you see from IRA.
From my perspective, we've certainly seen an acceleration, and not to plug our own tool, but the EV Jobs Hub really demonstrates that. When you set a filter of what happened kind of starting in August 2022 upon the passage of the Inflation Reduction Act, you see an explosion and a significant acceleration in the announcement of EV supply chain facilities in the United States. And I think what the Inflation Reduction Act did was turn the conversation around climate and clean economy kind of to expand it beyond deployment. So we could have easily had a climate bill that just incentivized people to buy EVs, but instead we had a climate bill that said, not only do we want people to drive and ride in electric vehicles and other electric transportation, but we also want to make sure that that technology is built here in the US, because otherwise we've missed a really big opportunity to transform our economy, right? We're not just doing these like one-for-one technology switches to decarbonize our economy and our lives. We're also trying to make sure that we're really realizing all of the benefits that can come with that. So instead of importing all of our technologies from abroad, and continuing on our path of economic inequality here in the U.S., we're using this transition to a clean economy to transform our own economy from the inside out and say, no, actually the U.S. can have its own supply chain for electric vehicles, including the batteries and the anodes and the cathodes within them, and the seat belt and the glass and the wheels. All of these things can be made here in the U.S., such that a transition to a clean economy doesn't just mean one individual is switching out their gas car for an electric vehicle, but it also means that we're creating and sustaining so many thousands of jobs across the entire country and across our economy. And now we're really maximizing the benefits of this transition, right? It's not just for the one person who's saving money because they're driving an EV as opposed to a gas car, but now we're seeing benefits across the economy for all of these communities where all of these components are being built. And so thinking about climate policy as industrial policy is the big transformation that I see coming out of the Inflation Reduction Act.
I want to pick up a little bit on that thread, and this question might go to either of you, whoever wants to take it. It might be an unfair question, but when I think about the clean economy and clean energy jobs and all these kinds of things, it's not a new topic. It's been around since the early 2000s, essentially, green jobs and such, but it never really took hold across a broad spectrum of either the body politic or just the public in general. Now it seems a lot more people understand why this is important and why it can't just be about, as you mentioned, Reem, it can't just be about incentives to drive purchasing. It also has to be about building a supply chain underneath so that the products are also a part of, the building of the products are a part of the economy. What changed? Like, why is that happening now? Is it like COVID? Is it just the fact that the politics happened to line up this time around? Do either of you have some insights into about, was it just the efforts of advocates like Reem? BGA succeeded in telling the story this time. What changed? Who wants to try to take that?
I think it's the couple of votes in Congress that really made things happen, as well as there's a concept in sort of political science of salience, which is, think of the catalytic converter, right? It existed for decades before the Clean Air Act came along, and the de-leading of gasoline. And there was a series of policies that convinced auto manufacturers to jump on board with catalytic converters rather than just, letting all of the pollutants get into the cities. And the particulate matter from leaded gasoline noticeably decreased the IQ of American citizens, which shifted, over the course of a couple of years when enough policies were in place for industry to adopt this new technology. And I think there's sort of a similar moment in time where between COVID, between a looming recession, which is always a great excuse to go out and build stuff and create more jobs. And I think that's quite successfully been avoided at this point. I mean, remains to be seen, but the jobs are happening. Unemployment has also hit, it's like 50 or 60 a year record lows for the US economy. But it was sort of this funny confluence of different factors that, if not for sort of the pandemic, if not for Biden getting elected maybe right after Trump, who brought in all of these ideas around America first, make America great again. I think, there is this interesting trend of globalization and then backlash to globalization. And I think the moment was exactly right for legislation like this to occur. And, if you followed Manchin at the time, it almost didn't happen. And so I think we're really lucky to be here. When I was in grad school, I was like, no way I'm going to government. And then half of my dissertation went to the White House to go advise on infrastructure development and industrial policy. And it was, sort of a shock to everybody.
Reem, anything you want to add on that?
I mean, yeah, I'll add that I think that the climate movement kind of got wise to the fact that there's a limit to the number of hearts and minds that you can win talking about greenhouse gas emissions and the polar bears, and kind of began to take a more intersectional approach to understand that, you know, if we want to advance climate policies, then we need to bring everyone along, and that includes people in Michigan and Ohio and Nebraska and Arizona who you know, the signs of climate change are all around us. You know, the sky turns orange every year now, depending on where you are. But we also need to kind of present a positive vision for what fighting climate change can look like. And we need that vision to be clear and attainable for everyone. And so kind of incorporating the potential economic benefits is a really important thing that the climate movement has learned, and I think that's why BGA is so potent as an advocacy organization, is because we do talk about a clean economy and about a livable climate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's a great segue to my last question for you both. And Reem, I appreciate your optimism. I'm an eternal optimist about a lot of this stuff. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been working on this for the last 15 years. I want to hear from both of you about what your recommendations are about what we need to do to ensure that all of this money is going to build these sustainable communities like we've been talking about, and avoid a Rust Belt 2.0. You know, for many decades, there are large parts of the country that were industrial hubs. And as the economy evolved, some of those places were left behind. The one that I consistently think back to is West Virginia, and their transition off coal has been so devastating to so many parts of that state. And it just seems as though people have just accepted that as an outcome of a transition. And I just don't get the sense that that's gonna be okay this time. And so, at least with the folks who are in charge right now. So why don't we start with Anna on, you know, what can we do to make sure that we don't repeat those mistakes of the past?
Yeah, it's a really important question that I think requires a more systemic view of what's happening, as well as a real clear sense of where are the geographic impacts of things. One challenge we've had in the past is, you know, the shift from manufacturing to software and services has really been from the Midwest. You've got, you know, all of these cities that were the biggest manufacturing, most bustling metropolises in the country, shifting to, you know, your Silicon Valley, New York, and that sort of considering the geography of where things are happening, as well as trying to maintain that focus on the real critical importance of building physical products and physical infrastructure. I think we're realizing now, it's funny to me, everyone's been worried about robots literally since the 1940s or even the Victorian era. You'll see, I think 1940 or early 1940s, Fortune published a magazine that was like the laborless factory of the future. What will happen to the jobs? And now we're finding that what AI is really, really good at is writing code. And it's actually pretty difficult to get robots to manipulate physical objects when you're talking about sort of smaller batch, more innovative production. And we really need enough of that manufacturing and prototyping domestically in order to know how to build things and to know how to build whatever the next generation of things is going to be. And so I think this sort of thinking geographically, as well as thinking about the physical production of goods and all of that, what that entails, because it was really policy that drove a lot of the manufacturing overseas, and a sort of lack of recognition for the critical importance of domestic production. Mm-hmm. We had Bush Senior, I think, was one of his economic advisors. There's an apocryphal apocryphally said something like, who cares if we're building potato chips or silicon chips, right? It's all manufacturing. It's all the same. And, Germany and Japan, whose manufacturing industries we really helped rebuild during the post-World War II occupation, with folks from the New Deal who understood how important that was to sort of democracy and to having a thriving, equitable economy. It was Americans who really went overseas and helped rebuild those policies and those entire manufacturing ecosystems. And then we forgot about that domestically, starting in the 60s and 70s, as we were automating to some extent, and then really just letting everything go overseas over the past couple decades. And so now that I think we've realized that was a problem, hopefully we'll be able to both maintain our enthusiasm for infrastructure development and manufacturing and sustainable economies, everything that comes along with the physical production of goods, as well as thinking critically about, all right, so you don't have coal anymore. We're seeing this in Florida and Texas, for instance, as they're moving off of petroleum and natural gas, right? Would hydrogen make sense to go in because you can sort of use some of the same pipeline infrastructure? So that's been a big focus of the DOE in particular. We have these disadvantaged communities that we're trying to revitalize through various policies.
Reem, over to you to bring us home.
Yeah, I mean, I think the flip side of what Anna just shared is that we need to keep a watchful eye on all of the companies that are already benefiting from federal dollars and holding them to their commitments. I think we get a lot of really exciting and breathless statements about the number of jobs that they're going to be creating and the investments and wealth that they're going to be bringing into their communities. And it remains to be seen if those promises are actually realized. And it is up to policymakers who represent the workers who will staff those facilities to actually hold those companies to account. And you don't just get to celebrate the ribbon cutting of the new battery factory in your district. You need to make sure that this company is actually treating workers with respect and giving them the dignity and wages and benefits that they deserve. Because I think that something that we really need to keep an eye out for is that we're really celebrating all of these new manufacturing investments that are happening in every corner of the country, but it doesn't really do anyone any good if a new battery manufacturing facility is offering folks $15 an hour to do kind of temporary contract work. These are not the types of jobs that we want to see being created in a new clean economy, because those jobs are not going to remedy the economic injustice that we already have in our economy. And so continuing to keep a watchful eye on how this kind of nascent industry develops is something that we're really focused on doing, and that we really want to see policymakers doing more and more to make sure that we aren't kind of repeating the mistakes of the past.
What a great plug for the joint effort of Atlas Public Policy and BlueGreen Alliance, evjobs.bgafoundation.org, where we are going beyond the press release, as you say, to track these announcements and investments to see what actually is happening in these communities around the country. It's very exciting times, but I completely agree with you, Reem, that we've got to make sure that we're keeping a close eye on what's actually happening on the ground and not just logging the press releases. So with that, it's the end of our episode. Thank you so much to Anna from now OMB and the, what is it called? The Made in America office. Did I get that right? Awesome. And Reem from BlueGreen Alliance. I'm your host, Nick Nigro. Thanks again for joining us on EV Hub Live. We'll be back again soon.
Thank you, Nick.
Thanks, Nick.